Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're not feeling a bit already bored after the lunch and ready to take a nap because I have a good news for you today and a bad news. The good news is that this talk is going to last 30 minutes and it's almost the last one of the day. The bad news is that it's going to be pretty interactive. I want you and I need you to interact with me with the discussion we're going to have to make this even more valuable and interesting for everybody. Before starting, I'm gonna reply to a question you may have, like, who is this guy? Like, why is this guy here talking about product management in startup versus corporate? So, nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Rosario. I'm Italian originally, currently living in Germany, in the beautiful Manhattan. And if you know, you know, or otherwise you can search on Google, Perplexity, ChatGPT, whatever you prefer. I like to say that I spent the last 5 years of my career in the 0 to 1 product trenches, which is like actually building product from zero. Just to give you an idea, in my first startup experience, I was not only the first PM, but also the very first employee. So I really know what does it mean starting from zero. I'm currently leading the product team, the Italian product team in Coverflex, which some papers ranks claim it's one of the fastest growing Southern European startups or scale-ups now. So that's my 9 to 5. My 5 to 9 is actually doing some startup advisory, some product mentorship. It's a cool way to say that what I do is actually sharing the mistakes I made in my career, the mistakes I made in my product journey, in order for others not to replicate them. So it's not that fancy as it seems. Now, I asked you to be interactive in this session, so it's your turn. I don't think I can actually pass the microphone to each of you, even though I would really like it. But Paul, I think, would kick me out. So let's do another thing. Let's raise your hands. And let's start with a simple question. I'm not sure I can actually see everybody with these slides, but I'll try. Raise your hand if you have some sort of agile title or you are in the agile world. Let me see. Okay, cool. Now raise your hand if you have a product title, product job, owner, manager, specialist, whatever. Okay, cool. Now raise your hand if you work in a company with more than 50 people. Cool, okay. Last question, I swear. Raise your hand if you ever wondered working in startup. Any type of, or even startup experience. Cool, okay. Then thanks a lot for this quick survey, because we understood that we are aligned on the topics of today. And so the next question, which is, so this talk I told you is not something that I'm gonna share with you, but you are gonna share with me something. In this case is when we talk about startup PMing, so doing product in startup, what are the cool things or the expectation you have in your mind? Like, what's cool in your mind about doing product in startup? Can you shout something? Let me see if I... Product, like actually building? Hands-on product, okay. Starting from scratch. Fast changes, absolutely. Close to the customer, and then somebody else said something? Okay, user centricity. Something else? No legacy systems, no tech debt, that's cool. Low management, somebody there, up there, yes? Innovation. And I must tell you, all these things were also my expectation before joining my first startup. So freedom to build, like I'm gonna go in a startup and start building things, make impact. The decision-making process will be blazingly fast. I will finally do weekly releases. So, and sometimes even faster than weekly, like maybe daily releases. That's so cool. And less meetings, finally. Like I will not have my agenda packed with meetings, useless, most of them with 20 people that don't know why we are all there. And the user centricity, like we will build something for actual users. And that's true. But then when I actually joined my first startup, I realized that all this comes at a cost. And the cost is that, yes, you are free to build, but you don't even know what you are building. Like, what am I building? And yes, the decision-making process is very fast, but then you have constant pivots. I think in the discussion we had in this track this morning, we were talking about roadmaps that change several times in a quarter. And I was making the same joke to my friends, my PM colleagues. I was saying sometimes, guys, this quarter I've been so lucky that my roadmap just changed 2 times and not more than that. And weekly releases, yes, but you have only one front-end developer and maybe one backender, and you need to solve dozens of critical bugs in production. And my favorite one is less meetings, because that's true. You actually have less meetings, but then you end up on a Friday evening at 10 p.m. with your founder writing on WhatsApp and saying, Rosario, I just got an idea after having a shower, let's talk. And that's actually true. Like, it really happened to me. So I don't know if this is cool enough. All this to say what? I'm not saying that startup PMing is not as cool as you think. Actually, it is. But what I'm saying is that when I actually joined my first startup experience, I realized that applying the traditional PM rules was frustrating to me because they were not working in that world. I was feeling like trying to apply those rules in this 0 to 1 context was like trying to play football but using tennis rules. So I was constantly penalized because I was not following the right rules. So after this moment of realization, I understood several things. I collected several learnings, and I would like to share with you 6 of them. I know usually professional speakers tend to have 5 rules, 5 plus 1, 10, like more rounded numbers, but I wanted to be different in this case, so 6 rules. The first one, I'm gonna start with this first one with an experience, an actual example of what happened in my very first initiative in startup. So we had a problem with onboarding. Users basically were not completing the onboarding, or not a lot of users were completing our onboarding process in a B2B SaaS. It was a platform like Canva, the graphic platform. So what I did as my very first initiative is, okay, let's apply the playbook of onboarding, like what all the onboarding expert, the product-led growth expert says that you should do, which is optimize the onboarding, cut steps, ask only things that you need, yada, 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 right? That's usually the drill. We did it. We invested several weeks on that, being very analytical, scientifically driven with all the events tracked in order to track metrics, yada, yada, yada. What happened is that we improved the onboarding process. We improved our activation rate by 20%, which is amazing, okay? Outstanding result for a corporate probably, not for a startup. And in that moment, I realized that 20% improvement in our case was nothing. And we needed to aim at 10x, 5x, something very bold. And in that moment also, what we tried was, we said to ourselves, okay, what if we just remove the onboarding? Like, what do we have to lose? Nothing. We have nothing to lose. So let's completely remove the onboarding. Let's make the user use the product first, understand the value of that product, and only afterwards ask them to sign up. And in that way, we had an actual 10%, 10x increase. And that's what you should do in startup. Like, you should always aim for big bets and not for small optimization. You will reach a time where you should focus on optimizing the journey, several flows, and user journey overall, but that's not the time. In this moment, you just need to find the big thing, the big bet that makes you have that also incremental learning. Second question for you, or no, probably I asked you already several things, but let's fake it's the second question. I want to ask you, how many of you thinks that working in a product role in startup means actually building a product or working on a product, nurturing that product. Are there many people thinking like that? Okay, okay, yes. And also on this sense, I was completely aligned with you. I was thinking the same, like I'm joining a startup, what I have to do, my job is to build a product. Nothing but false. Your job in this case is not to build a product, is to validate a business model, which is a complete different thing. Like when you join a startup, most of the things that are foundational for your product still need to be validated. And you are that guy that should validate those foundational assumptions. And we are not talking about just foundational assumption, we are talking about every feature you are releasing or you are working on is based on assumption that must be validated. So if you think in this perspective, you are not working anymore on feature, but you're working on experiments that aim at validating specific hypotheses. And this also means building experiment fast, learn fast, and iterate until you have that confidence to actually build a fully scoped feature. And still, related to this, these experiments must be fast, must be cheap. Why? Because you should think at a startup as a ticking bomb. It's a bomb that you know at a certain date will explode. That date is usually when you run out of cash. And if you are like a VC-baked or investor-baked startup, you also know exactly when that date is. You can mark it in your calendar. It's usually just to give you a proxy, 12 months from your last round, usually more or less that's the timeline. And if also in this case, if you think in this perspective, it means that you have 12 months to be able to reach certain criteria to raise the next round or to be profitable. So under this perspective, every day that you invest on building that feature, make that button pixel perfect, refining or polishing that design is one day less of life for your company. So what you should really think about is, okay, these are my assumptions, the assumption that I want to validate with this experiment. What's the scrappiest, simplest, cheapest way I can validate it? And sometimes, or what actually helped in my experience is asking to yourself and to your team, how can we validate this without writing even one line of code? Because in this moment, you shouldn't care about how much code you ship to production. What you should really care about is how many experiments you release or you put out there. Are you with me still? Alive? Okay, perfect. And this fourth one is probably a bold statement, I know. Somebody may not agree with me, but in my opinion, the main problem between being a product manager in a startup versus being a product manager in corporate is that we have the same job title, but the job is actually different. Like we are calling the same way two different jobs. Because being a product manager in startup means do whatever it takes, means validate the business model. And validating that business model means also not necessarily build a product, as we said before. Like in my very first startup experience, I pitched to investors, I sold to customers, I did customer support, I did customer success. And to be honest, that's totally fine. It's fine that you do that, those type of activities, because if you do them intentionally, you actually learn a lot from that. You gain market knowledge, you gain user knowledge, and you are able to increase that confidence in those other experiments, in those hypotheses we were saying before. So it would be a problem actually if you don't do those things. And also for the sake of being fast, for the sake of being cheap, sometimes you will also write copy. Sometimes you will also design wireframes. Nowadays, with the ChatGPT AI and the different AI tools, it's even more common for this to happen. And you should be fine with that. If you're not, that's not probably the right segment for you. Also, the fifth takeaway is probably the one where I saw most people kind of failing in this startup experience, because people expect usually, or product people expect usually to have that process that they saw in some Marty Kagan's book or some product books, like, oh, that one where you have discovery and delivery, and then first problem discovery, and then solution discovery, and it's all fine, all cute, all fancy. I mean, yes, ideally you should have it. On the other hand, that's not what you could expect from a startup. In a startup, most likely you will join with no process at all, no product process at all. Maybe one founder is giving some direction to some engineers, but it's everything very random. So it's your job to try to understand what could be that process like. And most importantly, in this case, you should also try to understand what's the right balance between actually create a process or navigate that uncertainty. Because also in this case, adding a process on top of what you're doing sometimes may also slow down your experimentation process. So you should even be fine with going pirate-ish and just go wild. My suggestion in this case is just try to iterate, as we always do. Try to see also what your team feels more comfortable with, what are the type of rituals that are beneficial for the team, and what else is not that much beneficial, is adding just more bureaucracy on top of it. Are you ready for the last one? The last one is probably the takeaway that may make or break your startup experience. And I'll tell you, this one is something you can already detect in the during the hiring process. So if you ever wonder to join a startup, please be laser focused at the first glance at this step we are going to talk about. All right? Are you still with me? Yes, amazing. So stakeholders manager is a critical, management is a critical skill for a product manager. We know it, absolutely. The problem is that in startup, your main stakeholder is a founder that has 5 roles and 20 ideas per day, and most importantly, he believes that, or they believe that that startup is their baby. So they are overprotective versus their product. So what I would really suggest you to do in this case is build trust early, starting from the hiring process. Be sure you are aligned on the values, on the principles. Like, put aside the product principle, put aside any type of product culture, concept, or anything related to product. You should be aligned on a human level. Like, do we think that, like, do we believe in the same principles? Are we, do we get along okay or well as a person? If that's if yes is the answer to that question, then we can move on to the other points, which is, okay, let's build a relationship which is also radically transparent. And this is the toughest one to implement. I must tell you, my first startup experience kind of, I wouldn't say failed, but it didn't end up well because of that, because I was not able to create that environment of transparency and trust with my founders. And I learned that lesson in my second startup experience. What I did was, okay, I took my founders aside and told them, guys, we need to find a ritual to discuss, to argue, but in the end of that discussion, we should be aligned, either disagreeing and committing or actually agreeing and committing. And what we did in that moment was, you know what, every time we were not aligned on during a meeting, during a session with the team, we were just doing a standby, we were asking for a pause, going aside, like in another room, just the 2 of us, the 3 of us, and having some sort of royal rumble there. So discussing intensively, but we all knew the rule of the game. We all knew that we were in that moment, in that specific moment, fighting. It was nothing personal. We were just debating on the idea, on the way to move forward with the product, with our company, but that's it. And this is super critical, trust me. That's the most important characteristic that you need, or area that you need to work on, to actually invest time on it. So we are basically at the end of the talk. So let's try to recap these 6 takeaways that we discussed together. I hope you have now a 0 to 1 product management survival kit. Like, if you either want to found your own startup or work in a startup, you could like try to apply these 6 principles and see how it goes. So the first one is, don't chase for short-term optimization, but try to seek 10x. Then don't ship feature on faith, but actually validate every assumption. And this validation should be fast, cheap, and as quick as possible. Don't stick with your job title. You are not a product manager. You are like the guy that can do everything and should do everything. And this could be a problem. So really be the go-to person for when it comes to own the problem that your startup and your product is trying to solve. My suggestion is, don't even open product books. They wouldn't work in your case. So don't go in that direction. What you could do instead is trying to openly design that process with your colleagues, your teammates, and the whole company, because we're talking about startups. So you may have 10, 20 colleagues overall, not that much. So co-design this process. Try to see what works well with you and what works not. Nobody ever said that you can also live without having user stories or pixel perfect user stories as the playbook dictate. And the last point, you are not managing stakeholders. You are actually building a trustworthy relationship with your founders. And this is the core thing you should focus on in this stage. Because once you have your founders' trust, then all the rest comes pretty easily, I would say. So what I didn't tell you at the beginning is that these 6 rules are actionable in startup environment, but they also work in corporate. So, corporate rules probably don't work in startup, but vice versa, this is the case. So what I would like to ask you, actually, I have 2 tasks for you at the end of this talk. The first task is take at least one of these principles in the next 6 months, try to implement them in your reality, try to implement it in your own companies, doesn't matter the size, and then get back to me and telling how it worked, if it worked, if it didn't, why, sharing your experience. And the second task I have for you is, let's talk. Also, after this session, stop me wherever you see me, connect with me on LinkedIn, let's have a chat. I'm always available for that. We also have some, how is it called, Paul? I think Ask the Expert session. So I'm available also just to chat, because I think it's not that much what I can share with you, but more like what I can learn from you. So thanks a lot for this session. It's been a pleasure.